My name is Olivia, I'm 31, and my own sister stole my fiancé with my family's help. Before I tell you how I ended up with the power to decide my father's entire career in my hands, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, the subject line a punch to the gut, Mom misses you, Olivia. I was sitting in my office, the corner one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a view I had earned with 3 years of relentless, soul-crushing, and ultimately liberating work. The text of the email was a masterclass in manipulation, a symphony of guilt trips and passive-aggressive pleas about how much they were struggling, how they needed me, how family is family. I stared at the words, my coffee growing cold. My finger hovered over the delete button, a small act of defiance that felt monumental. It felt like just yesterday, but it was 3 years ago. I was huddled on the floor of my tiny apartment, the phone pressed hard against my ear, listening to my own mother justify the ultimate betrayal. I was sobbing, the kind of ugly, gasping sobs that steal your breath and leave you hollowed out. Ryan had just left. My fiancé. He had stood in my living room, that same living room where we'd planned our future, and he couldn't meet my eyes. He'd told me he had feelings for my sister, Natalie. That he was breaking off our engagement. The first person I called was my mom. In that moment of pure, unadulterated pain, all I wanted was my mom. Instead, I got a judge, jury, and executioner. Well, Olivia, she had said, her voice devoid of any warmth, just a weary sigh as if my heartbreak was an inconvenience. These things happen. Natalie has been struggling so much since she dropped out of college. She deserves something good in her life. You should be happy for her. I remember the silence that followed, a roaring vacuum where a mother's comfort should have been. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Happy for her? I whispered, the words cracking, tasting like ash in my mouth. She took my fiancé. My life. Don't be so dramatic, she'd snapped, her voice turning sharp. You're strong. You'll be fine. Your sister needs this. It's not like you were filing for divorce, you were just engaged. I deleted the email. A cold, hard smile I didn't recognize touched my lips. They had planted the seeds of this storm years ago, watering them with favoritism and neglect. Now, they were about to reap the whirlwind. To understand how a family can detonate its own foundation, you have to understand their golden rule, Natalie gets, Olivia gives. It had been the unspoken law of our household since we were children. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who got good grades and never caused any trouble. Natalie was the vibrant one, the charming one, the one who could set the house on fire and be forgiven before the smoke cleared because she'd flash a dazzling smile. I remember being 12 years old with a clarity that still stings. I'd spent months studying for the regional math competition, sacrificing weekends with friends and late nights of reading for pleasure. I lived and breathed algebra and geometry. When they announced my name for first place, I felt like I could fly. I ran all the way home, the heavy, gold-painted trophy clutched in my hands, my heart hammering against my ribs with a pure, simple pride. I burst through the front door and found my parents in the living room. I won! I won first place! I announced, holding the trophy up like it was the Olympic torch. My dad glanced up from his newspaper, his eyes barely registering the object in my hands. Oh, that's nice, honey. Good for you. My mom smiled faintly, a distracted, polite smile. That's wonderful, sweetie. Now, could you be quiet for a minute? We're about to watch the video of Natalie's poetry recital from school today. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, as they turned their full attention to the television. They spent the next hour cooing over a shaky, out-of-focus video of my 10-year-old sister stumbling through a mediocre poem about a sad flower, a poem she'd scribbled on a napkin that morning. They praised her passion, her raw, artistic soul. My father even got a little misty-eyed. She just feels things so deeply, he'd whispered to my mother. I looked down at the trophy in my hands. It suddenly felt cheap, heavy, and ridiculous. I quietly backed out of the room, took it to my bedroom, and shoved it in the back of my closet behind a stack of old board games. It was the first time I truly understood that my achievements, no matter how significant, would always be background noise to Natalie's most mundane performances. My value was measured in my utility and silence. The pattern was set in stone and hardened over the years. When it was time for college, it was a given that I would figure it out on my own. I worked a grueling part-time job at a diner, the smell of grease clinging to my clothes, and I applied for every scholarship I could find. I wrote essays until my fingers cramped, all to build up my own college fund and avoid being a burden. I graduated with honors in computer science, a degree that promised a stable future. The same year, Natalie, who was attending a local community college for art, a tuition my parents happily paid for, dropped out after one semester because the 8 a.m. classes were stifling her creativity. A few weeks later, she crashed my dad's car. It was the second time in a year. Did she get a lecture? Grounded? Was she told to get a job to pay for the damages? No. They bought her a brand new compact car, a shiny red one. She just needs something reliable to get her to job interviews, my mother explained, her back to me as she washed dishes. She didn't look at me as I was putting on my sensible shoes to take the bus to an interview for my first real job. My starting salary was going to be decent, but I had a mountain of student loans to think about. The injustice of it all was a constant, bitter pill I was forced to swallow. Then, I met Ryan. It was at a tech conference in a city 3 hours away. It was the first time I'd felt truly seen. He wasn't just charming, he was brilliant. He listened when I talked about my work, his eyes lighting up with genuine interest. He didn't see a quiet, responsible girl, he saw a passionate, intelligent woman. We fell in love quickly, a whirlwind of shared dreams and late-night coding sessions, fueled by cheap pizza and endless coffee. After 8 months of dating, he proposed on a quiet evening, in the middle of our tiny apartment, with a simple, elegant ring. It wasn't huge, but it was perfect. I felt like my life was finally, truly starting. For the first time, I had something that was just mine. The night I brought him home to meet my family was the beginning of the end. I should have seen it coming. Natalie, who was then 26 and still living at home, finding herself, took one look at Ryan and her eyes lit up with a predatory gleam I knew all too well. She had a sixth sense for anything that brought me happiness and an insatiable need to claim it for herself. She emerged from her room wearing a tight red dress that was completely inappropriate for a family dinner. The entire evening was a performance, with Natalie as the star and Ryan as the prize. She spent the entire time leaning across the table, her hand brushing his arm as she laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, Ryan, you're so funny," she'd giggle, flipping her long, blonde hair. "Olivia never told me you were this much fun." My parents, instead of shutting it down, ate it up. They were basking in her reflected glow. "It's so wonderful to see how well you two connect," my mother beamed, looking from Natalie to Ryan as if I wasn't even there. My dad just nodded along, a proud smile on his face. "Our Natalie, she can charm anyone," he chuckled. I felt a familiar cold dread creep into my stomach. I was becoming a ghost at my own engagement dinner. I tried to steer the conversation back to us, to our wedding plans, the venue we were considering. But every time I spoke, Natalie would interrupt with a story about herself, or she'd ask Ryan a direct question, pulling his attention back to her. I watched the man I loved, the man who was supposed to be my future, get pulled into her orbit, and my family was the gravitational force. I went to bed that night with a knot of anxiety in my chest, a premonition that I desperately tried to ignore. A few weeks later, the bomb dropped. Ryan showed up at my apartment after work. He looked pale and haggard. He wouldn't look at me, just stared at a spot on the wall over my shoulder. "I don't know how to say this, Olivia," he mumbled, his voice thick. "I think I've developed feelings for Natalie." The floor fell out from under me. It was a physical sensation, a violent lurch in my gut. "What?" The word was a strangled whisper. "We've been talking," he confessed, finally looking at me with eyes full of pity, which was somehow worse than anything else. "Just as friends at first, but it's more than that. There's just this incredible connection. I can't fight it. I'm so sorry." He slid the engagement ring off my finger and placed it on the kitchen counter. It looked small and meaningless now, a cheap piece of metal. After he left, I slid down the kitchen cabinets and collapsed onto the cold linoleum. The first call was to my mother. It was a reflex, a desperate, primal need for comfort. But the woman on the other end of the line wasn't a mother. She was Natalie's defender, her enabler-in-chief. "You need to be the bigger person, Olivia," she said, her voice laced with that infuriatingly calm disappointment she reserved just for me. "It's not like you're getting a divorce, you were just engaged. You're 28, you'll find someone else. Natalie has had such a hard time. She's so sensitive. She deserves this happiness." I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck, a rage so pure it almost choked me. She deserves my fiancé? She deserves to destroy my life? What about my happiness, Mom? Does that ever matter? "Don't be selfish," she said, her voice turning to ice. "You've always been the strong one. Be strong now. For your sister." And the line went cold. Shaking, I called my dad. My last hope for a shred of sanity, of justice. I could hear the TV blaring in the background, a game show. He listened impatiently as I choked out the story. "Olivia," he said with a heavy sigh, his voice tired and distant. "Just listen to your mother. Don't make things difficult for everyone. Don't make things difficult." My world had just been shattered by the three people who were supposed to love me most, and I was being told not to make things difficult. That night, something inside me broke. Or maybe, it was finally forged into something hard and unbreakable. The tears stopped. I sat on my floor, in the dark, for hours. A wave of cold, sharp clarity washed over me. These people were not my family. They were a weight, an anchor of dysfunction dragging me to the bottom of the ocean. I looked around my small apartment, at the photos on the wall, the little trinkets that represented a life of desperately trying to earn their love. It was all a lie. A pathetic, one-sided effort. I didn't cry anymore. I got up, my movements precise, almost robotic. I opened my laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I typed out a transfer request to my company's branch in another state, citing urgent and private personal family matters. I went to my closet and packed one large suitcase with my most important documents, my professional clothes, and nothing sentimental. I took the ring Ryan had left on the counter and, without a second thought, dropped it into a public donation bin on my way out of the building. I drove to my bank and cleared out my savings account. Then, I went to my phone and, one by one, I deleted their numbers. Mom. Dad. Natalie. I blocked them on every social media platform. I left a simple note on the kitchen counter. It had 3 words, "I am gone." I got in my car and drove for 12 hours straight, fueled by coffee and a cold, burning rage. I didn't stop until I crossed the state line. I didn't look back. The next 3 years were a blur of work. I poured every ounce of my pain, my anger, my frustration into my career. It was my refuge and my weapon. I worked weekends. I took on the hardest projects, the ones no one else wanted, the ones with impossible deadlines and complex problems. I wasn't just running from my past, I was building a fortress against it, brick by painful brick. And it worked. I got one promotion, then another. I went from a junior developer to a team lead, then to the head of engineering for my entire division. My new salary was more than my father had ever made in his best year. I bought a small house with a yard and a garden. And I met Marcus. He was a kind, stable architect who loved me for my mind and my resilience. He listened. He celebrated my successes without a hint of jealousy. He was everything Ryan wasn't. He was real. One evening, about 3 years after I'd left, my phone rang. It was my cousin, Lisa, the only member of my extended family I hadn't cut off. She was a good person, a neutral party who had always been kind to me. "Hey, Liv," she said, her voice hesitant. "I don't know if you want to hear this, but things aren't going so well back home." I stayed silent, my posture rigid, letting her talk. "It's about Natalie and Ryan," she continued. "It was a disaster. Ryan lost his job about a year ago, something about poor performance. He started drinking. A lot. They fought constantly. Natalie couldn't handle him being broke and miserable, so she dumped him and moved back in with your aunt and uncle. They're having a really hard time financially. And your dad's company, Northgate, is having massive layoffs. He's terrified he's next on the chopping block. They had to sell the house you grew up in." I felt nothing. A complete and total absence of pity. It was like hearing a weather report from a distant country. "Thanks for letting me know, Lisa," I said calmly. "I hope you're doing well." That call was the first crack in the dam of silence I had built. A week later, the emails started. First from my mother, with saccharine subject lines like "thinking of you" and "family is everything." Then came the ones from Natalie, full of misspelled words and breathtaking self-pity, asking if she could crash with me for a few weeks to get back on her feet. I deleted them all without a reply. Then, things escalated. My mother started showing up. First at my apartment building, leaving tear-stained, manipulative letters with the doorman. I instructed him to throw them away. Then, she came to my workplace. She waited in the lobby, telling the receptionist she was my mother and that it was an emergency. I saw her from the internal security camera feed, looking frantic and entitled. I had to have security escort her out. The humiliation was immense. The final straw was when they both showed up, cornering me in the parking garage after work. My mother grabbed my arm, her face a mask of desperation. "Olivia, please. We need you. Your father might lose his job. Natalie can't find work. We have nothing." Natalie stood behind her, arms crossed, a sneer on her face. "Yeah, it must be nice sitting in your ivory tower while your family suffers. You owe us." Owed them? The audacity of it was breathtaking. That was when I hired a lawyer. A sharp, no-nonsense woman who listened to my story with a grim expression. We filed for a restraining order the next day. For months past and blessed, court-ordered silence. I thought it was over. I was so wrong. The invitation to the Innovator of the Year Awards Gala felt like a validation of everything I had worked for. My company had nominated me for my work on a groundbreaking new software platform, and I had won. Marcus was beaming with pride, helping me choose a dress, a sleek, elegant navy blue gown that made me feel powerful. I was ready to celebrate my new life. The day of the gala, Mr. Harrison, my CEO, called me into his office. He was a sharp, direct man in his late 60s who valued competence above all else. "Olivia," he said, getting straight to the point. "You know we're in the final stages of the Northgate Industries acquisition." I nodded, my heart beating a little faster. It was the biggest news in our industry. "It's a mess over there," he continued, leaning back in his chair. "Their tech infrastructure is a dinosaur held together with digital duct tape. We need to integrate their systems with ours, and it requires a delicate touch. This isn't just about code, it's about people and processes. We need a leader who understands the technology inside and out, but also has the strategic vision to oversee a massive restructuring. I want you to lead it. You'll be the head of technical integration for the entire project." I was stunned into silence. It was a massive leap of responsibility, a position of incredible power. "Sir, I'm honored. "You've earned it," he said simply. "Your work speaks for itself." That evening, as I was doing my makeup for the gala, an email notification popped up on my phone. It was from Natalie. The subject was just my name. Against my better judgment, my finger tapped the screen. It was a long, rambling tirade, filled with typos and pure, uncut rage. "You think you are so much better than us now with your big job and your fancy life," it read. "Dad might lose his job because of your company and you don't even care. After everything we did for you, you owe us. We just need the money, it's not like we actually want you back. You are so selfish and you always have been. I hope you fail." I read it twice, then a third time. A cold, calm certainty settled over me. I took a screenshot and saved it to a secure folder on my phone. It was the final piece of evidence I didn't even know I needed. It wasn't about love or family. It was never about that. It was just about what I could provide. The mask was completely off. The gala was a glittering affair. Crystal chandeliers, the sound of a string quartet, the low hum of conversation among the brightest minds in the city. I was standing with Marcus and Mr. Harrison, a glass of champagne in my hand, actually feeling happy, when Lisa sent me a text. "They're here. All three of them. I saw them at the check-in. Be careful." My blood ran cold. I scanned the room, and there they were, near the entrance, looking horribly out of place. My father in an ill-fitting old suit, my mother in a gaudy dress that was a decade out of style, and Natalie, looking thin and bitter in cheap black clothes. They looked like ghosts at a feast. And they were heading straight for me. They descended like vultures. My mother grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Olivia, thank God," she began, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, tears already welling in her eyes in a practiced display of maternal grief. "We need to talk. Your father, the company, you have to help us. Don't you dare walk away from us," Natalie hissed from behind her, her voice low and venomous. "After all you've put us through. You have to fix this." It was a clumsy, desperate performance. People were starting to stare. Mr. Harrison looked concerned, his eyes flicking towards the security detail near the door, but I gave him a slight, almost imperceptible shake of my head. I was done running. I was done being humiliated. A few minutes later, they called my name. I gently removed my mother's hand from my arm, straightened my dress, and walked to the stage, the applause a distant buzz. I accepted the heavy glass award. I looked out at the crowd, my eyes finding my family. Their faces were a grotesque mixture of envy and desperate hope. They thought this was their moment, their chance to leverage my success, to guilt me in front of my peers. I thanked my company, my team, and Marcus, my voice steady. Then I took a deep breath, and looked directly at them. "And I'm especially excited to use this opportunity to announce my new role," I said, my voice clear and professional, ringing through the silent hall. "As of this afternoon, I have been appointed as the head of technical integration for the Northgate Industries merger. My primary responsibility will be to evaluate and restructure their entire technology division to ensure maximum efficiency and alignment with our corporate strategy." I let the words hang in the air. I didn't say layoffs. I didn't say downsizing. I didn't have to. The words restructure and efficiency were corporate speak for a purge. I watched my father's face. The color drained from it. He went white as a sheet, his hand coming up to grip his chest. He understood. His 30-year career, his pension, his entire professional legacy, it was all going to be reviewed, analyzed, and judged on efficiency by the daughter he had cast aside. The power dynamic of our entire lives had just been reversed in one public, devastating announcement. My mother's jaw dropped, her fake tears forgotten. Natalie just stared, her mouth agape, the smugness on her face finally, irrevocably shattered. Later that night, as Marcus and I were leaving, my father cornered me by the valet. He looked 10 years older. Olivia, he stammered, his hands trembling. About Northgate. I've been there for 30 years. I know the systems. I can be valuable. I looked him dead in the eye. My voice was quiet, professional, and utterly devoid of emotion. All personnel will be evaluated based on performance and suitability for the new structure. It's standard procedure. Good luck, Dad. I turned and walked away without looking back. I never spoke to any of them again. The next 6 months were about building, not destroying. Marcus and I bought a larger house together, one with a big garden and lots of light. I picked up my old photography hobby, finding peace in capturing beautiful moments instead of dwelling on ugly ones. I started mentoring a young woman in my company, a brilliant engineer fresh out of college, making sure she had the support and encouragement I never did. I made sure she knew her value from day one. One day, I was scrolling through Lisa's social media. She had posted a photo from a work party at a local restaurant. In the background, out of focus but unmistakable, was a figure in a cheap, black uniform, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was wiping down a table, her expression exhausted and empty. It was Natalie. There was no grand explosion, no dramatic confrontation. Just the quiet, mundane reality of consequences. It was the most satisfying ending I could have imagined. Tonight, I'm standing on the balcony of my new home, looking out at the garden we're planting. The air is cool and clean. For a long time, I thought forgiveness meant letting people back into your life, accepting their apologies whether they were sincere or not. I know now that's not true. Sometimes, the greatest act of love, especially self-love, is having the courage to close the door, lock it, and throw away the key. It's about choosing your own peace over their chaos. Marcus comes up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He rests his chin on my shoulder, and we stand together, watching the first light of dawn paint the sky. A new day. A new life. One that I built, on my own terms. Thank you for listening to my story. Have you ever had to make a hard choice to protect your own peace? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more.